Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., March 8, 2011. To the Senate, under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Jeff Merkley, a senator from the state of Oregon, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
Mr. President.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business for 2 hours, with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each, with the time equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or their designees, the Republicans controlling the first hour and the majority controlling the next hour, with 30 minutes under the control of the Senator from Massachusetts. Senator from Wyoming.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I come today to the floor of the Senate to discuss an issue that is critically facing the American people, and it is the price of gasoline at the pump in this country. It is something that is, in my opinion, going to impact our economy, going to impact the economic recovery that we are all hoping would continue in this country. But with every penny that the cost of gasoline at the pump goes up, it's been estimated that that takes about $1 billion away from the amount of money that can be spent on other things in this country to get back to growing the economy. And we're at a point where the American people who have to balance their budget every year, states have to balance their budget. Of course, Washington doesn't do that, but the American people do, and they have to focus on their pocketbook, and when they're going to fill up with gas and noticing that they're approaching a point where it's going to be $100 to get a fill-up, they worry about the impact on the quality of their life, their ability to put food on the table for their children, and clothing on their children, and even have the money to get back and forth to work, those fortunate enough to have jobs. And you say, well, is it really a problem? I believe it is, Mr. President. I filled up yesterday morning in Casper. A young man in front of me at the filling station filling up his pickup truck. You know, he's watching the numbers go up and up and up. I filled up a week ago in Wyoming as well, and because we use a lot of gasoline in Wyoming, we travel long distances, and was filling up in the evening, put my credit card in, and it stopped at $75 because apparently they have to reset these things. And, you know, you'd think that with $75 at the time you'd have enough money to fill up, but not as these gas prices continue to rise. And my concern is that so much of this money is being sent overseas to people who are trying to blow us up. We have an opportunity to be much more secure in our energy resources by developing our energy sources at home, and it just seems that this administration's policies are making it that much harder. You say, well, how high can gasoline prices go with the unrest in the Middle East? Front page story a few days ago, USA Today, it says if unrest spreads, gas may hit $5 a gallon, $5 a gallon by summer. You know, we need to do some things in this country that this administration has continued to block. We need to find more of our own energy, be reliant more upon ourselves and less upon foreign sources of energy. And that means doing three things: exploring offshore, exploring on federal land, and exploring in Alaska. We know there are huge reserves of oil, of energy in those locations, and yet day by day those efforts are being blocked. And the impact of this on our overall economy is huge, and it's because of policies of this administration. I mean, just today, the USA Today this morning, will gas prices stall the U.S. upturn? Consumers could cut spending again. It's not in the best interest of this country, Mr. President, for us to have energy policies that make it more expensive for Americans to fill up their cars. It does not help the economy of this country when we do things, when the policies of this administration do things that make it more expensive and harder for small businesses to create jobs and hire people. We're trying to get people hired, back to work. That's what we need to focus on, jobs and the economy. And when the administration's policies cut into our ability to use energy sources from within this country, red, white, and blue energy jobs, red, white, and blue energy as well, and just send more money overseas, that doesn't help us as a nation. It doesn't help our economy. It doesn't help strengthen our communities. You know, we're so blessed in this country with wonderful families and wonderful communities and wonderful land, and yet We don't seem to be making wise decisions on a daily basis, Mr. President, with the policies coming out of this administration. Now, you know, it's interesting to see who is actually benefiting from all of this, these increased costs, because we know that the American families aren't benefiting. We know American taxpayers aren't benefiting. We know that people trying to get their kids off to school aren't benefiting. So who's benefiting from this huge increase in the cost of energy and the cost of oil? All you need to do is go to the front page of the business section of today's New York Times. Fears about Mideast oil pay off for Russia. For Russia, Mr. President. It's you know, whatever the eventual outcome of the Arab world's social upheaval, there is a clear economic winner so far, Vladimir Putin. Right there. That's the winner. Our policies, our economic policies of this administration to limit our ability and curtail our ability to use American energy, American oil to keep down the cost of gasoline is benefiting Russia. It says Russia, which pumps more oil than Saudi Arabia, is reaping a windfall from the steep rise in global energy prices resulting from instability in oil regions of the Middle East and North Africa. Now, Russia doesn't have any oil wells standing idle. Right now, Russia is pumping oil at its top capacity. So, you know, in a country where we in the United States, and this Congress in particular, chooses winners and losers in energy, the winner seems to be Russia because of the policies of this administration. And, you know, the Hill newspaper this morning, pump pain for Obama. This clearly lies specifically at the feet of the President because of the policies of this administration. Now, we've had a situation in the Gulf of Mexico, Mr. President, where there has been a moratorium which has extended almost permanently, shutting down the use of oil reserves for the United States. And the administration is so happy and pronounced that the moratorium have not until this week allowed for an additional permit, and finally won when the price of gasoline at the pump went up 38 cents on average to now about $3.50 per gallon. The Department of Interior last October, the Federal Register came out and they had a solution. They had actually some ideas about this because they admitted, the Department of Interior, the President's own Secretary of Interior and his department admitted that what they were doing in the Gulf of Mexico would have an impact, and it says the impact on domestic deepwater hydrocarbon production as a result of these regulations is expected to be negative. Well, what it means is it's going to cut down on American sources of energy. We need energy security, and we as a nation need to do it in an environmental responsible way, and we need to focus on economic growth. And this administration doesn't seem to be willing to make that distinction about energy security and economic growth and the needs that we have to help make our economy stronger. So what is the administration's position? What, as of October of last year, was their position on all of this to say, okay, we know that we're going to have impacts in the Gulf. They didn't say, oh, I know, we can go onshore and look on federal land. They didn't say, oh, let's go to Alaska to explore. No, this is this administration's position. They said, currently, there is sufficient spare capacity in OPEC, in the Middle East, to offset a decrease in Gulf of Mexico deepwater production that could occur as a result of this rule, the rule that they're going to shut down the Gulf. Therefore, the increase in the price of hydrocarbon products to consumers from the increased cost to drill and operate on the outer continental shelf is expected to be minimal. That's the administration's solution. They don't expect anything to happen. They're not worried about it. And if there's a problem, just buy more energy, more gasoline, more oil from OPEC, send more American dollars overseas. That's the administration's position. And what about the impact of that on our economy? Now, we do have a Secretary of Energy. You would think he'd be concerned about the cost of energy and the impact on American families. Well, not so, Mr. President, when you look at some of the statements that he's made. In the past, he said somehow we have to figure out how to boost the price of gasoline to the levels of Europe. That's the Secretary of Energy's proposal. Figure out how to boost the price of gasoline to the levels in Europe. Well, how much does gasoline cost in Europe? Well, about almost $8 a gallon. Now, the president, when he was a senator and running for president, he didn't seem to think that high energy prices were a problem. He just wanted the cost to go up gradually, he said. He thinks that the problem is when things go up too quickly. Mr. President, the American people who try to put bread on the table for the kids and clothing on their backs and get them off to school and then go to work themselves, they notice this. They know every time the cost of a gallon of gasoline goes up by a penny or a nickel or 38 cents as it has most recently. And the economy will suffer as a result. And it's specifically a result of the policies of this administration, the policies that ignore the need for American energy. And so, Mr. President, I think that at a time when we need to be focused on jobs in this country, that we need to realize the amount of uncertainty in the Middle East. There is now sticker shock at the pumps, and it is the policies of this administration that are the things that are keeping us from using it to develop the energy security we need. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Senator from Nebraska.
Mr. President, thank you. I rise today to speak for a few minutes about our current fiscal situation. Over the next few weeks, we're undoubtedly going to have a very robust debate on our country's future and the tremendous issues we face. We're going to have a debate about the need for fiscal responsibility. One thing that all of my colleagues should be able to agree upon is that our current level of spending and borrowing and debt is just simply not sustainable. When you're bringing in $2.2 trillion, but you're spending $3.8 trillion annually, something is seriously wrong. And adding $1.65 trillion to the national debt each and every year is not the answer. We simply can't afford to continue in this direction. For too long, the answer of Washington was, we will be all things to all people, promising everything with really no plan to pay for it. The result now is that we face a financial crisis unlike anything our nation has ever seen. While Americans are making very tough, painful decisions in their daily lives, their government still refuses to make the same difficult choices. Now, Mr. President, I come from a state where its citizens really do believe that less government is better government. But even if my colleagues disagree that less government is better, we'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who can argue with the numbers. Numbers don't lie, and they can't be spun. So let's take a look at the numbers, grim by any economist's viewpoint. We are currently borrowing 42 cents on every dollar, 42 cents. So every dollar spent today, every dollar spent this year by the federal government, 42 cents is borrowed. Can you imagine an average family charging nearly half of all of their spending to the credit card? Well, it won't take long for that family to face bankruptcy. Well, what's happening, Mr. President, with our nation is this. We are absolutely losing control of our destiny. I heard the gentleman from Wyoming talk about the oil issues and the fact that we're shipping our resources out of this nation, and that's absolutely true. But what is also happening is this. For every dollar borrowed, we have to find a banker. And look at this chart. Who are our bankers out there? China, Japan, other foreign holders, oil exporters, the UK, and you begin to understand the point. Billions of dollars annually are being borrowed from foreigners who have really no home interest in our nation. The interest payments on our debt will increase to almost $1 trillion by 2020, an increase of 370% since 2009. Again, just look at the chart. The numbers don't lie. A nearly 380% increase by 2020. Now, the American people are absolutely appalled at trillion-dollar annual deficits. Just imagine their horror at trillion-dollar annual interest payments. And what if current interest rates go up, which many project that they will? Each 1% increase in interest rates equals, get this, $140 billion in additional debt. Our interest payments alone will eventually bankrupt our country before we even begin to think about providing services to our citizens. And then we'll suffer. If you like education, if you want to build more roads and bridges, guess what? It will suffer. Our society will suffer. And probably most importantly, for those of us in the United States Senate, the legacy we leave behind for our children and grandchildren of a diminished standard of living because we could not get our spending under control is absolutely a horrific legacy. Our country's national debt totals nearly 70% of our entire gross domestic product. Looking down the road, within 10 years, our publicly held debt will be at the 90% threshold. While the American public looks on this Enron accounting with utter amazement, they can't imagine 90% of their paycheck going to pay off debt. Yet their government just continues to recklessly add to the debt year after year after year, trillion-dollar deficits as far as the eye can see. Well, this is just enormous. It's record-setting annual deficit. The alarm bells are sounding. The red lights are flashing. The flags are waving. We have to stop it. While this discussion won't likely even acknowledge the entitlement iceberg headed our way, we have to come to grips with the reality that we can't finance what we have promised. Yet some object to $61 billion in spending reductions. In the grand scheme of what we are dealing with, that's hard to imagine. How can we possibly attack a massive debt if we can't even come to agreement on $61 billion out of a $3.5 trillion annual budget? Now, I acknowledge $61 billion is significant. I acknowledge that many of these programs are programs I like. But if we don't come to grips with this, those programs won't exist. Yet many are saying, well, let's do a little nip and a tuck. Let's maybe get $4 billion out of this. That's only 14/100ths of 1% of reductions. Does anyone really think that's a serious effort? Nobody's buying that. The media's not buying it. The American people aren't buying it. And I just did town halls, 9 of them all across the state. They're not buying it back home. Well, it's time to roll up our sleeves, Madam President. It's time to say, look, we can't go on doing this. It is my intention to be on the floor on these issues a lot in the weeks and months ahead. I believe we are at a tipping point. If we don't turn this around, we may lose the ability to control our own destiny in this debate. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor. I note the absence of a quorum.
Madam President.
The senator from Tennessee.
Madam President, my understanding is I have up to 10 minutes.
That's correct, but we are in a quorum call because
Okay.
I didn't hear him withhold the quorum.
I ask that the quorum call be set aside.
Thank you. If you'd let me know if I take that long, I typically don't, but if I get within, say, a minute and a half or so, if you'd let me know, I appreciate it. I'll probably be long gone, but thank you. Madam President, I rise today to speak also on the matter of our country's unlimited spending, the fact that this last month in February, I don't know if many people know this, it was just published, we had the largest budget deficit for 1 month in recorded history of $223 billion. Those numbers were just released, and I know that we have some measures we're going to vote on this week regarding reductions in spending. I realize the Republican version likely will not pass, the Democratic version likely will not pass, and then hopefully we will sit down and work out something to allow government to be open again for hopefully the long-term CR. I know we're having a lot of difficulties in our departments as they try to manage their budgets not knowing what we're going to do. But as the gentleman from Nebraska mentioned, $61 billion is a drop in the bucket as it relates to trying to solve our country's problems. Madam President, that's why I've brought forth something called the CAP Act. I've tried to do it. I have done it in a bipartisan way. There are numbers of people in this body that have supported the CAP Act. I think the thing for you, Madam President, a former governor, and other people here who have Tennessee families who have to live within a budget, I think what we realize around here very quickly is that we have absolutely no construct. We know not where we're going in the future. We never have a plan. What we do is what we're doing this week. We fight and debate over things that take us almost nowhere, and yet we have not a long-term plan as it relates to spending. I think everybody in this body knows that when we have $3.7 trillion in spending this year and we have $2.2 trillion in income, that trying to solve this problem by only dealing with discretionary spending makes no sense. I mean, if you did away with all discretionary spending during this year, all discretionary spending, including defense, you still would not have a balanced budget. And all of us know that it's all of the mandatory programs that have to be added into this, and what we need to do is create a comprehensive budget, a straitjacket for Congress. Madam President, I, along with others here, have offered something called the CAP Act. What it does is take us from where we are today over a 10-year glide path to the historical average of spending in this country relative to our country's output. And that's about 20.6% of our country's economic output. I've tried to not message. This is not a messaging bill. It's a bill that I truly hope to pass. I've been meeting with numbers of my Republican colleagues and Democratic colleagues. I have numbers of meetings set up over the course of the next several weeks to try to build consensus, and here's the way it would work. We would pass it as a statutory bill, and what we would do is take us from where we are today, which is a little over 24.5% of spending relative to our country's output, which is way out of line. And by the way, I'm not here to cast blame. I think both parties can recognize some of the contributions they've made to getting us where we are as a country. But the fact is, we know that we cannot continue on the path that we're on today. We know that. And what we have to do is not just look at discretionary spending. I've had so many of my colleagues on the floor talk about trying to solve this entire problem with only a very small percentage of the budget. Makes no sense. Everybody understands that, and everyone here, I know, wants to ensure that the entitlement programs that the seniors benefit from are here for the long term. We want other seniors to benefit from that, and yet we know that the way these programs are set up today, they're not sustainable. There's not a person, I don't think, there may be a few, I think Most of it will be rhetoric, but, I don't want to be, casting judgment. I think everyone here knows that these programs cannot continue as they are. So what this would require us to do is to start today working ourselves down to 20.6% of our GDP. Again, it's been the historical average for 40 years. This wasn't something to try to overreach. For what it's worth, what it would mean to our country is that over the course of the next 10 years, as opposed to the course that we're on now, the alternative CBO scenario, which is what they deem most likely to occur without our action, this would mean that we would spend $7.63 trillion less than we're now spending. And this is how it works. There's a formula in here. It's a 10-page bill. There's not a lot of whereases in this bill. It's just a business document, something like a former governor from New Hampshire might be accustomed to looking at, but it's a business document, puts in place statutory limits. They're formula-driven to take us from here to there. If we don't meet those requirements, then after 45 days at each year, there are targets each year, spending relative to our economy. And by the way, this joins everybody at the hip wanting our economy to grow, because if our economy grows rapidly, those targets are much easier to hit. But if Congress didn't act, if we didn't have the courage to act, then what would happen is there'd be automatic sequestration coming on a pro rata basis, depending on the numerator, what the size of that particular budget appropriation is relative to the overall budget. But on a pro rata basis, you'd have sequestration that would just take those monies out. None of us want to see that happen. And so that would force us to actually do the things that any Congress acting responsibly needs to do, and that is to actually work together each year to meet those requirements. And instead, I've heard so many people, especially on the other side of the aisle, coming down and talking recently about focusing on discretionary spending only, is basically cutting out some of those things that might make our country stronger. There are some things, certainly in all of these bills, as the senator from Nebraska was mentioning, that I might have differing priorities, but the fact is that when you try to do it all, only on discretionary spending, you're not only not solving the problem, okay, what it does is cause you to actually look at some things that might otherwise make our economy grow. And again, this bill, the CAP Act, with Claire McCaskill, has co-sponsored as an original co-sponsor with me, and others are looking at it. This bill would cause us to look at everything. So again, first comprehensive look, spending relative to our economy at historical levels. Everything is on the table and on budget. Sequestration would be in place, and it would take a two-thirds vote of Congress to override these spending limits. Madam President, again, I did not come here to message. I didn't come here to move the bar beyond what the other side might be doing just to make a name for myself or create publicity. I came here to solve our country's problems. I look at these young people in front of me. I don't think they have any idea what our irresponsibility is doing to them. And we talk about future generations, but I think all of us know, thank you very much, I think all of us know that we're actually at a point now that we've been so irresponsible that it's not just going to affect future generations, it's getting ready to affect us. There's a lot of turmoil in this world today, and for that reason, the United States of America has been perceived a safe haven, and our interest rates continue to be low because of the rest of the world's turmoil. The fact is that we all know that if and when, and we hope that's a when soon, things settle down, that as people begin to, again, look closely at where we are as a country, and if we continue to not act responsibly and show the world that we have the ability to at least put in place this framework which would cause us to work together to get to a place that we all know we need to go, then I fear that interest rates over time are going to run from us, and that interest rates relative to debt payments, interest relative to our debt payments is going to continually consume more. So again, in closing, Madam President, I appreciate the time. I really have I went around the state of Tennessee and had 43 meetings talking about this type of approach. I know that numbers of people on the other side of the aisle have talked about what they feel is an appropriate level of spending relative to our country's economy. I know that this bill is not out of line. I know that this bill is at least appropriate. There are a number of people that think it should be lower. But this is something that would cause us to first agree on where we're going. And, Madam President, I know that you know it's very difficult for a body like this with 100 senators and on the other side 435 House members to agree on little things when you really don't have any idea where it is you're trying to go. And this would create a target for us. It would create a straitjacket for Congress. It would really cause us to prioritize. And I'm going to continue talking about this until hopefully we pass it and actually have a process to cause us to work together in a constructive way. With that, I yield the floor, and I thank you for the time.
Madam President.
Senator from Louisiana.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I rise to focus on another grave threat to economic recovery and jobs, and that is skyrocketing energy prices, particularly the price of gasoline at the pump. Madam President, I don't have to point this out to Americans all over the country, Louisianians all over the state. They see it in front of them every time they go to get a new tank of gas. Ever-increasing energy prices, ever-increasing prices at the pump. Right now, on average, nationwide, the price at the pump is $3.51 a gallon. That's about 80 cents higher than the average price a year ago. And most Americans know it's not stopping there. They see $4 gasoline coming sooner rather than later, and who knows how far it will go beyond $4 at the pump. This is a real threat, Madam President. We're trying to come out of the worst recession since the Great Depression, and this is an immediate threat to put the brakes on any recovery we may be mounting. And it's sure a real threat and a real hit to Louisiana and American families. It's a direct hit to their pocketbook. Americans, Louisianians hear talking heads on TV, national economists saying we don't have any inflation. Listen, they're hit every time they go to the pump. They know there's inflation in key prices like gasoline, and that's a big hit to their family budget. Now, Madam President, this has sparked somewhat of a breakthrough in thinking among the ranks of the Obama administration. Let me explain what I mean by that. Recently, President Obama's Energy Secretary, Secretary Chu, focused on supply, and he said we need to increase supply to temper prices and mitigate the increasing price at the pump. And he said we need to do this by convincing the Saudi Arabians to increase their supply of oil on the world market. Quote, that's going to mitigate the price increase. And he said further, quote, we're hoping market forces will take care of this, close quote. Well, I at least give Secretary Chu and the Obama administration marks for this breakthrough, understanding that supply is a big part of the equation. In fact, it's half of the supply and demand equation that yields price. Also recently, the White House Chief of Staff, Bill Daley, made a comment that also went to supply. He said this weekend on some of the weekend talk shows that we need to consider opening up the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to put more product on the market, to increase supply, also to temper prices, to stop these ever-increasing prices. Again, I at least give Mr. Daley and the Obama administration credit for finally realizing, and it is a bit of a breakthrough, that supply is a big part of the issue. But, Madam President, where I disagree, where I want a further breakthrough, is that they need to focus on domestic supply that we can create and that we can control in the United States of America. And unfortunately, they're not doing that yet. Madam President, I've come to the floor many times to talk about the virtual shutdown of the Gulf of Mexico to energy production since the BP disaster. And I'll mention that again because it is at the heart of this issue. The administration understands we need to increase supply. What about domestic supply? What about the Gulf of Mexico? What about all of our other vast energy resources that we are taking off the table and shutting down? What about that supply? That's the first place we should turn. That's the first action we should take. That's what can help us control our own destiny. Instead, Madam President, there's been a virtual shutdown of the Gulf of Mexico to energy production. That's reduced direct and indirect employment in the oil and gas and service industries. It threatens to by 93,000 jobs for every year through 2035 unless we reverse it. It could reduce an additional 82,000 jobs every year through 2035 in non-oil and gas-related industries that are still impacted indirectly by this shutdown. It reduces annual GDP by over $20 billion a year, a cumulative impact of $500 billion in the next 25 years unless we immediately reverse course. It reduces long-term U.S. oil production by 27%. Long-term U.S. foreign oil imports are increased by 19%. Grapp, Long, and Littell estimates, that's a consulting firm, show that over 23 wells per month are needed to maintain current production levels in the shallow water of the Gulf of Mexico. And since the moratorium was lifted on shallow water drilling, the formal moratorium, the administration has only approved permits for new wells at a pace of 1.8 per month. So 23 versus 1.8. In deep water, it's even worse. There have been one deep water exploratory permit issued since the BP disaster, and only one in 9 months. And as a result, 6 deep water rigs have departed the Gulf. Discover America's Transocean has been moved to the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. Ocean Baroness of Diamond Offshore, it's a semi-submersible rig, has been moved to Brazil. Ocean Confidence, also with Diamond, has been moved to West Africa. Ocean Endeavor with Diamond has been moved to the Mediterranean Black Sea area. Stena Drilling has moved major equipment to eastern Canada. And Transocean has been moved, some of their equipment has been moved to West Africa. According to ODS, another 5 major rigs are scheduled to leave the U.S. Gulf of Mexico by April 1st. So that'll put that 6 number up to 11. And new well drilling has fallen from 20 in the first quarter of 2009 to 1 in the first quarter of 2010. So, Madam President, again, I applaud the administration's realization that supply is a big part of the issue, that we need to increase supply in order to stop these skyrocketing prices which are hurting Louisianians and Americans every day. But let's focus on domestic supply. Let's focus on the Gulf of Mexico. Let's focus on things we can directly control, not just begging the Saudi Arabians to increase their production. I want to create jobs here, not just in Saudi Arabia. I want our children to be independent, to control their own future, not to have to beg some Saudi Arabian prince. With regard to Mr. Daley's suggestion of opening up the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, you know, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is just that. It's supposed to be strategic for crises, for our security, national security as a country. It's not the Salazar Petroleum Reserve to open up, to cover up the complete ineptitude and foot-dragging at the Interior Department in terms of issuing permits for our own drilling. So let's not play politics with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Let's not treat it as the Salazar Petroleum Reserve to cover up the mistakes and ineptitude and foot-dragging of the Interior Department. Let's increase domestic production. Let's address the supply side of the equation that way aggressively and create American jobs in the process. Louisianians are depending on that. Americans are depending on that for jobs and to mitigate price at the pump so we don't have these ever-increasing prices at the pump that could kill a recovery that we're hoping to mount and that could hurt every American's pocketbook, every American family's budget. Again, Madam President, I urge all of my colleagues, Democrats and Republicans, to come together on this point and urge the administration to act. Yes, they're right. Supply is key. Let's start with domestic action, domestic supply, and mitigate price increases that way. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.
Madam President,
The Republican leader.
I'm going to proceed on my leader time.
The senator may use his leader time.
First, let me commend my friend and colleague from Louisiana for his observations about the need to increase domestic production. I think he certainly agrees with me. We'll be talking about this a lot more in the coming months as the price of gas at the pump continues to rise, and I thank him for his insight. Madam President, at some point this week, senators will have an opportunity to take a position on government spending on two bills the majority leader has predicted will fail. One is a serious effort to rein in wasteful Washington spending that's gotten completely and totally out of control. The other, by our Democratic friends, is a proposal so unserious that even its supporters have been forced to exaggerate its impact, something they've been called out on by the press repeatedly. That proposal comes on the heels of an equally unserious proposal by the White House last week to cut $6 billion from federal spending for the entire year at a time when Washington is averaging about $4 billion in deficit spending every day. Madam President, let me say that again. We're running a $4 billion deficit every single day this year. Apparently, Democratic leaders in Congress thought that even that was too much to cut because the bill they're proposing this week shaves it down to only 4.7. So you had the administration last week that said they'd go along with $6.5 billion. The proposal the Democrats in the Senate are going to lay before the Senate this week only reduces spending $4.7 billion. That's about what we're engaged in deficit spending every single day. We're averaging about $4 billion a day in debt this year, and Democrats want to cut $4.7 billion and call it a day. That's their idea of getting serious. Washington will add more to the debt this week than they want to cut for the entire year, and that's the farthest their leaders are willing to go. Anything more, they say, is draconian. Draconian. I'll tell you what's draconian. Draconian is what happens if Democrats don't get real about our nation's fiscal crisis. Yesterday, the Independent Congressional Budget Office issued a report that gave us a pretty good sense of the recklessness of Washington spending these days. Last month alone, the federal government spent $223 billion more than it had. Last month alone, the highest monthly deficit ever, and the 29th straight month Washington has been in the red. And here's the Democrats' proposal. Let's cut $4.7 billion and call it a day. $4.7 billion, even less than the President called for just last week. And even that was ridiculed because of the preposterous claim that it met us halfway. It's time our friends on the other side stop trying to see what they can get away with and actually summon the courage to get our fiscal house in order. Because here's the hard truth. Even the biggest cuts under discussion this week are puny compared to the fiscal problems we face in the area of entitlements. I mean, it's pitch battle around here over $4.7 billion when we've got a $14 trillion debt and more than $50 trillion in entitlement promises that Washington can't keep. If Democrats can't bring themselves to cut $4.6 billion, how are we going to get a handle on the really big stuff? This is just a dress rehearsal, Madam President. Democrats are going to have to do a lot better than this if we stand a chance of getting our nation's fiscal house in order. Frankly, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. The American people deserve better than this. It's time for Democrats in Washington to face facts. And as I said yesterday, it's time for the President to get off the sidelines and to lead. Because with each passing day, it becomes clear that Democrats in Congress cannot bring themselves on their own to get serious about the problems we face. They don't even want to admit these problems exist. Madam President, I yield the floor, and I suggest I yield the floor.
Bring Reed out because I know he wanted to say something.
Yielding now, so should we just talk for the rest of it? Is this our time?
It's not our time.
No.
It's still their
Okay.
time.
California.
I ask that the quorum call be dispensed with.
The senator is recognized.
I just wanted to know, from a parliamentary standpoint, what time remains on the Republican side and when does the Democratic time begin?
20.5 minutes remain on the Republican side.
Well, Madam President, it's my understanding that the Republicans have finished their time, and so I would like to ask unanimous consent that we can have that time. Unanimous consent that we start our hour at this point.
Without objection.
Thank you very, very much, Madam President. And, you know, I listened very carefully to my Republican colleagues who have come to the floor blaming the Democrats and the Democrats and the President for everything you can imagine, including the high price of gasoline and deficits as far as the eye can see. I want to say to my friend Senator Manchin, I'm going to make some very brief remarks about H.R. 1 and then yield to you for 5 minutes. Is that good? 5 minutes enough? That's good. Okay, very good. So my remarks at this time are as follows. I respect the right of any colleague to say whatever he or she wants on the floor. But I also want to tell the American people who may be following this debate that, in truth, in the last many years, 40 years, the only party that balanced the budget were the Democrats. Bill Clinton, in his presidency, not only took a deficit brought about by a Republican president, not only did he balance the budget with us, but we created surpluses, and guess what? 23 million jobs. Compare that to George W. Bush, created these huge deficits, handed President Obama over a tremendous debt and deficits. I'll get the exact numbers, and created 1 million jobs compared to 23 million jobs. So I appreciate the lectures from my Republican friends, but just look at any measure: job creation, budget balancing, stock market. Check it out, America. These are things that are in the history books. So please don't lecture us about how to balance the budget. We know how to do it, and the way you do it is cut waste, cut fraud, cut abuse, make sure everything you spend is essentially justifiable by the results, by the benefits, and invest in our people so that if they lose a job, we invest in worker training. Invest in our people. Invest in science and technology. Invest in health research. Invest in our children. And if you follow that method, we will not only balance the budget, we will create jobs. And we know that their approach, H.R. 1, which they support, would devastate this economy, barely doing anything about the deficit. And most amazingly, they don't think that billionaires should pay even a little bit higher tax rate than people who earn $150,000. Billionaires, multimillionaires. Doesn't make any sense. So with that, as an opening, I'm very pleased to yield to the senator from West Virginia, Senator Manchin. 5 minutes.